The rumble begins before dawn. Deep in the belly of the earth, steel awakens against steel, a metallic heartbeat that pulses through concrete and bone. In the driver's cab of the 647 northbound commuter train, Keisha Williams feels it in her chest, that familiar vibration that has marked the beginning of every shift for the past 8 years. 8 years of watching the world blur past her window. 8 years of carrying 300 passengers safely through their morning routines. 8 years of invisibility. Her hands rest on the controls with practiced ease, but there's something different about this morning. Maybe it's the way the autumn light cuts through the cab window, casting long shadows that seem to reach for something she can't name. Maybe it's the dream that woke her at 4 a.m., the same dream that's haunted her for 15 years. A child's voice calling her name. A child she couldn't save. The click of her watch marks 6:45. 2 minutes until departure. Keisha adjusts her cap, a gesture so automatic she doesn't realize she's doing it. The polyester fabric feels rough against her fingertips, still damp with the morning's nervous sweat. She's driven this route 2,847 times. She's counted every mile marker, memorized every curve, anticipated every stop. But something feels different today. Something in the air tastes like change. Through the windshield, Riverside Station spreads before her like a concrete amphitheater. Early commuters move in their predictable patterns, business suits clutching coffee cups, students with oversized backpacks, elderly passengers gripping handrails with arthritic fingers. 3 levels of platforms create a vertical city of morning rituals. And somewhere in that maze of movement, invisible to Keisha's trained eye, a 6-year-old boy named Tommy Chin is about to change everything. The radio crackles. Train 847, you're cleared for departure. Keisha's thumb hovers over the acknowledgement button. Standard procedure. Standard morning. Standard life. She presses the button and hears her own voice, steady and professional, responding with the same phrase she's spoken thousands of times. But inside her chest, something trembles. A premonition, maybe? Or just the coffee she shouldn't have drunk on an empty stomach. The train lurches forward with the gentleness of a sleeping giant awakening. First the electrical hum, then the gradual acceleration that presses passengers back into their seats. Keisha watches the platform begin to slide past her window, faces becoming blurs, individual stories dissolving into the collective motion of urban life. This is her world, the space between destinations, the liminal realm where she exists as the invisible guardian of other people's journeys. But on Platform B, something is wrong. Tommy Chin, 6 years old and curious about everything, has dropped his Spider-Man backpack. The zipper has burst open, scattering crayons and homework papers across the concrete. His mother, Dr. Lisa Chin, is 30 feet away, checking her phone for the morning's surgery schedule. She's a cardiac surgeon at Metropolitan Hospital, accustomed to life and death decisions, but she's also a single mother running on 4 hours of sleep and too much caffeine. Tommy sees his favorite red crayon rolling toward the platform edge. It's the crayon he uses to draw fire trucks and hearts and the sun in all his pictures. It's rolling away from him, and in his 6-year-old logic, losing that crayon would be catastrophic. He takes a step toward the edge, then another. The yellow warning line that's supposed to keep people safe becomes just another stripe of paint to a child focused on saving his precious crayon. In the driver's cab, Keisha feels the train reaching its cruising speed. The morning rhythm settles into her bones, the sway of the cars, the gentle vibration of wheels on rails, the distant murmur of conversations from the passenger compartments behind her. She's thinking about lunch, about whether she remembered to pay the electric bill, about the weird noise her car made yesterday. Normal thoughts for a normal morning. Then she sees him. A flash of red jacket at the edge of her peripheral vision. A small figure where no small figure should be. Time doesn't slow down, that's a myth. Time explodes into crystalline clarity, each second becoming a universe of possibility and terror. The child is falling. No, he's jumped. reached too far for something that sparkled in the morning light. His small body tumbles onto the tracks directly ahead of her train. Keisha's training kicks in before her mind can process what she's seeing. Emergency brake. Full stop. The procedure she's drilled 1,000 times but prayed she'd never need. Her hand slams down on the bright red emergency button, and immediately the train begins its tortured scream against the rails. Metal shrieks against metal, sparks fly like angry stars, and 300 passengers are thrown forward in their seats as 40 tons of steel fights against momentum and physics. But she knows. In that first crystalline moment of impact, she knows with absolute certainty that it won't be enough. The train will stop, but not in time. The mathematics are cruel and simple. Speed plus weight plus distance equals inevitability. Her mind, trained by years of engineering courses she took at night while working double shifts, calculates the terrible equation in milliseconds. 200 feet of stopping distance. 50 feet to impact. Tommy Chun has perhaps 4 seconds to live. Unless. The thought hits her like electricity. Her safety manual, her training, her 8 years of perfect procedure, all of it screams against what she's considering. Drivers stay in the cab. Drivers follow protocol. Drivers protect the train and its passengers above all else. But in that moment, watching a 6-year-old boy scramble in confusion on the tracks ahead, Keisha Williams stops being a driver and becomes something else entirely. She becomes a mother. Not because she has children, she doesn't. The universe took that possibility away from her 15 years ago, in a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and shattered dreams. She becomes a mother because some transformations don't require biology. They require only the recognition that a child needs saving, and you're the only one who can do it. Keisha's hand reaches for the door release. Emergency protocol violation number 1. The train is still moving, still slowing but not stopped. Opening the door while in motion is grounds for immediate termination, possible criminal charges, and almost certain injury or death. She knows this. Her hand reaches for the door anyway. The platform is chaos now. Dr. Lisa Chin has looked up from her phone to see her son gone, his backpack scattered like evidence of disaster. She's screaming his name, pushing through the crowd of mourning commuters who have suddenly stopped their routines to witness something unthinkable. An old man in a perfectly pressed suit is filming with his phone. A teenage girl is crying. A transit police officer is running toward the platform edge, but he's 50 yards away and getting farther by the second. And in the driver's cab, Keisha Williams is taking off her safety harness. This is the moment that will be dissected in news reports, social media posts, and investigative hearings for months to come. The moment when a black woman from the south side of Chicago, earning $47,000 a year to transport other people safely through their lives, decided that procedure meant nothing compared to a child's life. The moment when 8 years of perfect safety records became irrelevant against 4 seconds of moral clarity. She opens the door. The wind hits her like a physical blow, carrying the smell of steel and concrete, and the electrical ozone of the third rail. The train is still moving at nearly 20 miles per hour, fast enough to kill her if she makes a mistake. But Keisha Williams hasn't made a mistake on the job in 8 years, and she doesn't plan to start now. The jump is 12 feet. From the moving cab of a train to the platform where Tommy Chin is now sitting up on the tracks, dazed and crying but apparently uninjured from his fall. 12 feet across and 6 feet down, while moving at a speed that could turn her into another casualty instead of a rescuer. She's done the mathematics. She knows the physics. She jumps anyway. Time becomes elastic. In the air between the train and the platform, Keisha experiences every moment of her 43 years simultaneously. The childhood in Memphis where she learned that black girls had to be twice as good to get half as much. The engineering scholarship that got her out of poverty. The night shift jobs that paid for college. The marriage that ended when her husband couldn't handle her ambition. The miscarriage that taught her that some dreams die no matter how much you want them to live. And running through it all, the dream that's haunted her for 15 years. A child's voice calling her name. A child she couldn't save then. A child she can save now. She hits the platform hard, rolling to absorb the impact the way her father taught her when she was learning to ride a bike. Pain shoots through her left shoulder, but she's alive and mobile. Around her, witnesses are screaming, crying, filming. The train is still screaming too, its brakes grinding against rails in a symphony of tortured metal. But it's slowing. She has seconds. Tommy Chun looks up at her with brown eyes wide with confusion and terror. He's maybe 20 feet from where she landed, sitting in the center of the rail bed like he's in a playground instead of the path of 40 tons of approaching steel. His red jacket is torn, his face is dirty, but he's alive. For now. "Hey, sweetie," she says, forcing her voice to stay calm even as her heart hammers against her ribs. "I'm Keisha. I'm going to help you get out of here, okay?" He nods, too scared to speak. Behind him, impossibly close now, the train continues its agonized deceleration. She can see her own cab, empty now, the open doors swinging like a broken wing. In perhaps 10 seconds, this entire section of track will be occupied by several tons of unstoppable metal. Unless she can perform a miracle in the time it takes most people to tie their shoes. Keisha runs. Not towards safety, but toward danger. Toward a 6-year-old boy who represents everything she's ever wanted to protect and everything she's ever failed to save. Her feet pound against the wooden ties between the rails, each step a calculated risk on surfaces designed for trains, not desperate rescues. The third rail hums with deadly electricity 6 inches to her right. One misstep, one stumble, and she becomes a statistic instead of a hero. Tommy is crying now, the delayed shock hitting him as he realizes where he is and what's bearing down on him. "I want my mommy," he sobs, and the words cut through Keisha's chest like glass. She's heard those words before, in a dream that visits her every night. A different child, a different crisis, but the same desperate need for salvation. "Your mommy's right there, baby," she says, pointing toward the platform where Dr. Lisa Chin is pressed against the safety barrier, her face a mask of terror and helplessness. "We're going to get you back to her. But I need you to trust me, okay? Can you do that?" He nods again, and something in his expression changes. The panic is still there, but underneath it, she sees the beginning of hope. Children, she remembers from her education courses, are remarkably adaptable when they have a trusted adult to guide them. She just has to prove she's worth trusting in the next 8 seconds. The mathematics are still impossible. She can't carry him, he's too heavy and she's already injured. She can't push him to safety, the platform is too high. But there's a third option, one that her training never covered but her instincts understand perfectly. Sometimes salvation isn't about removing someone from danger. Sometimes it's about removing danger from someone. The train's emergency systems have activated the platform alarms now. Sirens wail, warning lights flash, automated announcements in 3 languages urge people to stand clear. But Keisha's world has narrowed to just her and Tommy, and the shrinking space between her stopped train and their fragile bodies. She wraps her arms around the frightened boy and pulls him against her chest, then lies down on top of him in the narrow space between the rails. It's called going under, a procedure so dangerous that it's not officially taught but every train operator knows about it. When you can't get out of the way, you get as low as possible and pray that the undercarriage clearance is enough to let death pass over you instead of through you. The space is 18 inches at most. Keisha is 5'6". Tommy is maybe 3 feet tall. The mathematics are still cruel, but now they have a chance. Above them, the train finally shudders to a complete stop. The screaming of metal on metal fades to an echo, replaced by the more human sounds of shouting, crying, sirens. Emergency responders are arriving, but they're too late to prevent the crisis and too early to assess its outcome. In the space under the train, wrapped around a 6-year-old boy she's never met before today, Keisha Williams waits to find out if her calculations were correct. The silence is the loudest thing she's ever heard. "Are we dead?" Tommy whispers against her ear. "No, baby," she whispers back, and realizes she's crying. "We're not dead. We're okay. We're going to be okay." But even as she says it, she knows that nothing will ever be okay again. Not in the way it was before. She's crossed a line that can't be uncrossed, made a choice that can't be unmade. In 4 seconds of moral clarity, Keisha Williams has transformed from an invisible train operator into something else entirely. She just doesn't know what yet. Above them, the investigation has already begun. Transit police are cordoning off the area, questioning witnesses, trying to piece together how a routine morning commute became a potential tragedy. Dr. Lisa Chin is in hysterics, demanding to know if her son is alive. The old man with the perfect suit is still filming, his phone capturing footage that will soon make the evening news. And in the space between life and death, between procedure and instinct, between invisibility and heroism, Keisha Williams holds a child and waits for the world to discover what she's done. The rescue takes 47 minutes. 47 minutes of lying motionless under tons of steel while emergency crews figure out how to safely extract 2 people from a space that wasn't designed for human occupation. 47 minutes of whispering reassurances to Tommy, telling him stories about trains and adventures, keeping his mind occupied while her own races through all the ways this could still go wrong. When they finally pull her out, when the hydraulic jacks have lifted the train enough to create a safe passage, when the paramedics have checked her for injuries and the firefighters have declared the scene secure, Keisha Williams emerges into a world that has fundamentally changed around her. The platform is packed with reporters, cameras, microphones thrust toward her face like weapons. Questions assault her from every direction. "Ms. Williams, how does it feel to be a hero? Did you think about your own safety? What made you decide to risk your life for a stranger's child?" She pushes through them without answering, her arm in a sling, her uniform torn and dirty, looking for only one thing. Tommy Chin is in his mother's arms, both of them crying, both of them whole. Dr. Lisa Chin looks up when she sees Keisha approaching, and the expression on her face is something Keisha has never seen directed at her before. Pure, overwhelming gratitude. The kind of gratitude that changes people. "Thank you," Dr. Chin says, and the words carry the weight of every prayer she's ever whispered. "Thank you for bringing him back to me." Keisha nods, suddenly unable to speak. She's saved him. After 15 years of failure, of nightmares, of carrying the weight of a child she couldn't rescue, she's finally saved one. The mathematics of redemption, it turns out, don't follow the same rules as the mathematics of physics. But as she stands there, surrounded by cameras and questions and the chaos of sudden fame, Keisha Williams begins to understand that her story is just beginning. The choice she made in 4 seconds of moral clarity has set something in motion that will reshape not just her life, but the lives of everyone who witnessed it. The video footage, the news reports, the social media explosion that's already beginning, all of it will transform a simple act of human decency into something much more complicated. Something that will reveal truths about race, class, heroism, and humanity that America isn't ready to confront. The first video appears on Twitter within an hour. Grainy phone footage shot by the man in the perfect suit, showing a black woman in a train operator's uniform jumping from a moving train. The caption reads, "Transit worker saves child's life, incredible." It gets 10,000 retweets in the first 20 minutes. By evening, it's gone viral. Multiple angles, multiple witnesses, all telling the same impossible story. A train driver who abandoned her post, violated every safety protocol, and risked her own life to save a child she'd never met. The footage is compelling, undeniable, and deeply uncomfortable for viewers to process. Because here's the thing about heroes in America: we like them to fit certain narratives. We like them to be white, preferably male, preferably from the military or law enforcement. We like their heroism to be clean, uncomplicated, free from moral ambiguity. We like heroes who follow procedure while somehow transcending it. Keisha Williams fits none of these expectations. She's a 43-year-old black woman who makes $47,000 a year operating public transportation. Her heroism came from violating rules, not following them. Her courage was born from moral conviction, not training. And her story is about to become a battlefield for every cultural war currently tearing America apart. The first wave of coverage is universally positive. Local news stations lead with the story. The mayor issues a statement calling her a hero. Transit authority officials, despite privately investigating her for protocol violations, publicly praise her quick thinking and selfless action. For about 36 hours, America agrees on something: Keisha Williams is a hero. Then the backlash begins. It starts, as these things do, in the darker corners of social media. Anonymous accounts with cartoon avatars and numbers instead of names begin questioning the narrative. Why did she abandon her post? What about the safety of the passengers? Was this really heroism or just reckless endangerment? The questions are framed as concerns about procedure, but the undertone is clear to anyone who's been paying attention to American culture for the past decade. Dr. Rachel Morrison, a professor of sociology at Northwestern University, is watching the story unfold from her office overlooking Lake Michigan. She's spent her career studying how heroic narratives intersect with race and gender in American media, and she recognizes the pattern immediately. The brief moment of universal praise, followed by the gradual erosion of the narrative, as people find ways to diminish or complicate the hero's actions. It happens every time, she tells her graduate students during an impromptu seminar on the Williams case. A person of color does something undeniably heroic, and America spends about a day celebrating before the doubt begins. Suddenly, people start questioning their motives, their methods, their right to be called a hero at all. The doubt spreads like a virus through comment sections and call-in radio shows. Why didn't she follow procedure? What if she had been killed? Wouldn't that have traumatized the child more? Was this really about saving Tommy Chin, or was it about getting attention? The questions multiply, each one more insidious than the last, until the very act that everyone initially celebrated becomes somehow suspect. Meanwhile, Keisha Williams is at home, trying to process what her life has become. Her phone rings constantly, reporters, talk show producers, documentary filmmakers, all wanting a piece of her story. Her employer has placed her on administrative leave pending the investigation. Her neighbors look at her differently. Her sister calls from Memphis, excited about seeing her on CNN. "You're famous, girl," Denise says during their third conversation of the day. "This is your moment. You need to capitalize on this." But Keisha doesn't want to capitalize on anything. She wants to go back to work, back to her invisible life of transporting people safely through their routines. She wants the dreams to stop, not the nightmares this time, but the overwhelming replays of those 4 seconds when she chose to jump. In her mind, she keeps reliving the moment, analyzing it, questioning it, wondering if she would make the same choice again. The answer, she realizes, is yes. Every time, yes. Even knowing what it would cost her. The investigation by the Transit Authority is thorough and by the book. They interview witnesses, analyze the train's data recorders, review security footage from 17 different cameras. The findings are unambiguous. Keisha Williams violated multiple safety protocols, abandoned her post during an emergency, and endangered her own life through reckless action. They're also forced to conclude that her actions directly saved Tommy Chen's life. The train would have struck him if she hadn't intervened. The mathematics are clear on this point. So they face an impossible choice: discipline a hero or validate rule-breaking. Corporate lawyers and public relations specialists huddle in conference rooms, trying to find a path forward that protects the organization while acknowledging reality. The solution they arrive at is typically bureaucratic. Keisha will be suspended without pay for 30 days for protocol violations, but she'll also receive a commendation for exceptional service. The contradiction pleases no one and inflames everyone. Civil rights organizations rally around Keisha, framing her case as an example of institutional racism. A white male employee would have been celebrated, not punished, argues Jerome Washington, president of the local NAACP chapter. This is exactly how America treats black heroes, with suspicion and condemnation disguised as procedure. Conservative commentators take the opposite stance, arguing that rules exist for good reasons and that celebrating rule-breaking, even for heroic purposes, sets a dangerous precedent. What happens when the next employee decides they know better than policy? Asks radio host Marcus Stevens. Do we want a world where individual judgment trumps established safety protocols? The debate rages across cable news, social media, and dinner tables throughout the country. Everyone has an opinion about what Keisha Williams should have done, what she represents, what her story means for America. But very few people are asking what Keisha Williams thinks about any of it. 3 weeks after the rescue, she finally agrees to give her first and only television interview. The reporter is James Caldwell, a veteran journalist known for his thoughtful approach to complex stories. They meet at Riverside Station, on the platform where everything changed. Ms. Williams, he begins, the country is divided about your actions that morning. Some call you a hero, others question your judgment. How do you see yourself? Keisha looks down the tracks, toward the spot where Tommy Chin fell. I see myself as someone who had 4 seconds to make a choice. I made the only choice I could live with. But you violated numerous safety protocols. Your own employer suspended you. Do you regret that? I regret that a child was in danger, she says. I regret that his mother had to experience that terror. I regret that procedure mattered more to some people than a 6-year-old boy's life. But I don't regret jumping. What would you say to critics who argue that your actions were reckless, that you could have been killed and traumatized the child even more? For the first time in the interview, Keisha smiles. It's not a happy smile, but one tinged with something deeper. I'd say that everyone's an expert after the fact. In that moment, with that child on those tracks, there was only one calculation that mattered. Could I save him? Everything else was just noise. The interview airs on a Sunday evening, reaching 12 million viewers. The response is immediate and polarized. Social media explodes with hashtags. #JumpForTommy and #FollowProtocol trends simultaneously. Think pieces appear in major publications within hours. The story has become a Rorschach test for American values, with each side seeing what they want to see. But something else is happening too, something quieter but more profound. Letters begin arriving at the Transit Authority, addressed to Keisha Williams. Hundreds of them, then thousands. From parents thanking her for protecting children she'll never meet. From other transportation workers struggling with their own moral dilemmas. From people who have faced impossible choices and found courage in her example. One letter stands out. It's from Dr. Lisa Chin, written on hospital letterhead but clearly personal. Dear Ms. Williams, it begins. Tommy asks about you every day. He wants to know if the lady who saved him is okay, if she's coming back to drive trains, if he'll see her again. I tell him that heroes don't always stick around, but their gifts do. The gift you gave us, Tommy's life, my sanity, our family's wholeness, is something we'll carry forever. I know the world is complicated and people are arguing about what you did and why. But from a mother's perspective, it's simple. You saw my child in danger, and you chose to help him. That's not just heroism. That's humanity at its finest. Thank you for reminding us what that looks like. Reading the letter, alone in her apartment, while news vans idle outside, Keisha Williams finally cries. Not from sadness or stress or frustration, but from relief. For 15 years, she's carried the weight of a child she couldn't save, Now, finally, she understands that some burdens are meant to be transformed, not simply carried. The disciplinary hearing is scheduled for a Tuesday morning in November. Media attention has died down somewhat, but the story continues to percolate through American consciousness. Academic papers are being written. Documentary crews are shooting footage. The case has become a reference point for discussions about heroism, race, gender, and institutional authority. Keisha arrives at the Transit Authority building with a small army of supporters. Union representatives, community activists, ordinary citizens who believe in what she did. They filled the hallway outside the hearing room, a diverse crowd united by the simple conviction that saving a child's life should never be grounds for punishment. Inside the hearing room, the panel consists of 5 officials, 3 from the Transit Authority, 1 from the union, and 1 independent mediator. They've reviewed the evidence, heard from witnesses, consulted with legal experts. The facts are not in dispute. The only question is what those facts mean. Thomas Henderson, the Transit Authority's chief safety officer, presents the case against Keisha. His tone is professional, almost apologetic, but his message is clear. Rules exist to protect everyone, and employees who violate those rules, regardless of their intentions, must face consequences. Ms. Williams' actions, while well-intentioned, created multiple safety hazards, he explains. An unmanned train, even one that was braking, poses risks to passengers and bystanders. Her decision to leave the cab mid-emergency violated fundamental protocols designed to protect everyone involved. The union representative, Maria Santos, argues the opposing view. What we're really discussing here is whether humanity trumps bureaucracy. Keisha Williams saw a child in mortal danger and took the only action that could save him. We can debate procedures all we want, but we can't debate results. Tommy Chin is alive because of her courage. When it's Keisha's turn to speak, she stands quietly for a moment, looking out at the faces of people who have supported her through months of controversy. Then she addresses the panel directly. I've been a train operator for 8 years, she begins. In that time, I've never been late, never had an accident, never received a single complaint about my performance. I know procedures. I follow them. I believe in them. But on that morning, procedure wasn't enough. A child was going to die, and I was the only person who could prevent it. She pauses, collecting her thoughts. You can suspend me, fire me, make an example of me. But you can't change what happened. You can't make Tommy Chin less alive, or his mother less grateful, or the choice I made less necessary. If following procedure means watching children die when you have the power to save them, then maybe the problem isn't with rule breaking. Maybe the problem is with the rules. The panel deliberates for 3 hours. When they return, the chairman, Robert Hayes, delivers a verdict that satisfies no one completely but acknowledges the complexity of the situation. After careful consideration, this panel finds that Ms. Williams violated established safety protocols in a manner that endangered herself and potentially others. However, we also find that her actions directly prevented the death of a child and represented the highest traditions of public service. Therefore, Ms. Williams will receive a formal reprimand for protocol violations, but she will also be reinstated immediately with full back pay and commended for exceptional service above and beyond the call of duty. The reaction is mixed. Supporters see it as a victory tempered by unnecessary bureaucracy. Critics argue that the panel caved to public pressure and set a dangerous precedent. But for Keisha Williams, the decision represents something more important than either vindication or punishment. It represents the possibility of moving forward. That evening, she receives a phone call from an unexpected source. It's Tommy Chin, now 7 years old and learning to use his mother's phone. Ms. Keisha? His voice is small but clear. Mommy says you can drive trains again. That's right, sweetie. I'll be back to work next week. Will you drive the train I ride to school? Maybe someday. Would you like that? Yes. And Ms. Keisha? Thank you for jumping. The simplicity of it, a child's uncomplicated gratitude, cuts through months of controversy and debate. In that moment, Keisha Williams understands that heroism isn't complicated. It's not about headlines or hearings or hashtags. It's about seeing someone who needs help and choosing to provide it, regardless of the cost. But even as she accepts this understanding, she knows that her story has become bigger than her individual choice. It has become a symbol in cultural battles she never asked to join, a touchstone for discussions about race and gender and authority that will continue long after the news cameras disappear. The return to work is anticlimactic. Keisha reports to Riverside Station on a Monday morning in December, 9 months after the incident that changed everything. The media attention has largely moved on to other stories, other controversies. Her colleagues greet her with a mixture of respect and normalcy that feels exactly right. She's assigned to train 847 again, the same route, the same morning schedule. As she settles into the familiar cab, adjusting mirrors and checking instruments, everything feels simultaneously identical and completely transformed. The controls are the same, the rumble of steel on steel is the same, but she's different. The invisible woman who drove this route for 8 years has been replaced by someone who understands her own capacity for courage. The first passenger train leaves Riverside Station at 6:47 a.m., just as it has for decades. On board are 300 people beginning their daily routines, most of them unaware that their safety depends on a woman who once jumped from a moving train to save a stranger's child. They read newspapers, check emails, drink coffee, and trust that they'll arrive at their destinations safely. And they do. Because Keisha Williams, hero and rule breaker, suspended employee and commended public servant, drives them there with the same careful attention she's always brought to the job. The only difference is that now she knows, really knows, that some choices transcend procedure, that some moments demand everything you have, and that the courage to act when action is needed is the most human thing of all. 6 months later, Dr. Lisa Chen publishes an essay in a medical journal about trauma, recovery, and gratitude. She writes about the morning her son fell onto train tracks and how a stranger's courage gave her family a second chance. But she also writes about something else, how witnessing true heroism changed her own approach to her work, her life, her understanding of what it means to serve others. Healthcare professionals talk often about life and death decisions, she writes. We pride ourselves on our ability to perform under pressure, to make split-second choices that determine whether patients live or die. But most of our decisions happen in controlled environments, with established protocols and support systems. What I witnessed that morning was different. A person with no medical training, no official authority, no safety net, choosing to risk everything for someone else's child. It reminded me that the highest form of service isn't following procedure. It's recognizing when procedure isn't enough and having the courage to act anyway. The essay is read by thousands of healthcare workers, many of whom share it with colleagues and students. Dr. Chen receives dozens of responses from doctors, nurses, and paramedics who describe their own moments of choosing between protocol and instinct, safety and service. The ripple effects of Keisha Williams' 4-second decision continue to spread in ways she'll never know about. Tommy Chen, now 8, has no memory of falling onto the train tracks. Child psychologists say this is common. Traumatic memories often fade when children are very young, especially when the trauma is followed immediately by rescue and safety. What he does remember is a kind lady in a train uniform who was brave enough to help him when he needed it. He draws pictures of trains now, and in every picture, the train driver is a black woman with a kind face. His mother has tried to explain about the news stories and the controversy, but Tommy's understanding is simpler and more profound. There are people in the world who help when you need help. Ms. Keisha is one of them. The Training Academy for Transit Workers has added a new course to their curriculum: Ethics and Emergency Decision-Making. The case study at the center of the course examines Keisha Williams' choice and asks students to consider when individual judgment should override established procedure. It's a complex topic with no easy answers, but that's precisely the point. The Academy wants future operators to understand that driving a train, or performing any job that affects public safety, requires more than technical competence. It requires moral courage. Some students struggle with the concept. If everyone makes their own decisions about when to follow rules, doesn't that create chaos? Others embrace it immediately, understanding instinctively that rules serve people, not the other way around. The debates in these classes are intense and revealing, forcing future transit workers to confront questions about authority, responsibility, and the weight of life and death decisions. Instructor Sarah Martinez, who developed the curriculum, often shows students the video of Keisha jumping from the moving train. "What you're seeing," she tells them, "is someone who understood that her job wasn't just to operate a train. Her job was to protect people. When those two objectives came into conflict, she chose people. That's the kind of judgment we want you to develop." But the story's impact extends beyond transportation workers, beyond emergency responders, beyond the professional communities that deal regularly with life and death decisions. In living rooms and office break rooms and college dormitories across the country, people continue to debate what Keisha Williams' story means. Some see it as validation of their belief that individual conscience should triumph over institutional authority. Others worry about the precedent it sets, the message it sends about rule-breaking and personal judgment. Parents use it as a teaching tool, asking their children what they would have done in Keisha's position. Ethicists write papers about the moral frameworks that justify extraordinary action in extraordinary circumstances. Religious communities find different meanings in the story. Some see it as an example of divine intervention, God working through human hands to save an innocent child. Others focus on the moral courage aspect, the willingness to risk everything for a stranger. Progressive congregations use Keisha's story to discuss social justice and the ways that institutional systems often fail the people they're meant to protect. Reverend Michael Thompson of Greater Mount Olive Baptist Church in Chicago has incorporated Keisha's story into several sermons. "What we see in Sister Williams," he tells his congregation, "is the kind of love that doesn't calculate the cost. The kind of love that sees a child in danger and responds immediately, without thinking about consequences or procedures or what other people might say. That's divine love working through human courage." His sermons are recorded and shared online, reaching audiences far beyond his South Side congregation. The comments sections become gathering places for people wrestling with their own moral dilemmas, their own moments when doing the right thing conflicts with doing the safe thing. But perhaps the most significant impact of Keisha's story unfolds in places where heroism is desperately needed but rarely recognized. Inner-city schools where teachers spend their own money on supplies for students who arrive hungry and leave to homes without electricity. Emergency rooms where doctors and nurses work double shifts because they can't bear to leave when people need help. Social service offices where case workers carry loads twice what they're trained to handle because there's no one else to do the work. These are the invisible heroes, the people who make extraordinary sacrifices for ordinary reasons, because someone needs help and they're in a position to provide it. Keisha's story gives them language for their own choices, validation for their own rule-breaking when rules stand in the way of service. Maria Gonzalez is a high school counselor in Detroit who has seen Keisha's story shared dozens of times in the educator Facebook groups she follows. Maria regularly violates district policy by taking students to doctor appointments, bringing food to families in crisis, and intervening in situations that are technically outside her job description. After watching Keisha's interview, she feels less alone in these choices. What she did for that child, Maria tells her husband over dinner. That's what we do every day on a smaller scale. We see kids who need help and we help them, even when the system says it's not our job. Maybe that's what heroes really are, people who refuse to let procedure get in the way of people. The ripple effects continue to spread in ways both visible and invisible. A pediatric nurse in Baltimore stops following a protocol that she realizes is actually harming patients, and saves 3 lives in 1 month. A firefighter in Phoenix ignores orders to wait for backup and rescues an elderly woman from a burning building. A social worker in Portland risks her career to remove children from an abusive home despite insufficient legal justification. None of these stories make national news. None become viral videos or hashtag movements. But each represents someone who learned from Keisha Williams' example that sometimes the most important thing you can do is the thing you're not supposed to do. The backlash against this interpretation is swift and predictable. Conservative commentators warn about the dangers of a society where individuals routinely override institutional authority. What happens when everyone decides they know better than the rules? Asks television host Patricia Davidson. What happens when personal judgment trumps professional training? We end up with chaos disguised as heroism. Legal scholars debate whether Keisha's case establishes any meaningful precedent. Employment lawyers report an uptick in wrongful termination cases where employees claim they were fired for doing the right thing, in violation of company policy. The results are mixed. Some employees are vindicated, others discover that good intentions don't always constitute legal protection. But the cultural impact is undeniable. Keisha Williams has become a reference point, a shorthand for the tension between doing what you're told and doing what's right. Her name appears in op-ed pieces about corporate whistleblowers, in discussions about civil disobedience, in debates about when individual conscience should override collective procedure. She never asked for this role, never wanted to become a symbol. But symbols aren't chosen, they emerge from moments when individual actions capture something larger about human nature, about moral courage, about the price of doing right in a world that often rewards playing it safe. 2 years after the incident, Keisha Williams still drives the morning commuter train from Riverside Station. She's been promoted to senior operator, with responsibility for training new drivers. Her classes always include a discussion about emergency decision-making, though she's careful not to explicitly encourage rule-breaking. Your first responsibility, she tells new trainees, is to the people who trust you to get them where they're going safely. Everything else, procedures, policies, protocols, those are tools to help you meet that responsibility. But if there ever comes a moment when the tools get in the way of the responsibility, you need to be prepared to make a choice. The trainees always asked if she would do it again, jump from the moving train, risk her career and her life for a stranger's child. Her answer never varies. I hope I never have to find out. But if I did have to find out, I hope I'd have the same courage I found that morning. Some of her trainees are disappointed by this response. They want absolutes, clear guidelines for when to break rules and when to follow them. But Keisha understands something that can't be taught in training manuals. Courage isn't a policy you can implement. It's a choice you make in moments when choice is all you have. Dr. Lisa Chin has established a scholarship fund in Keisha's name at the local community college, specifically for single mothers pursuing careers in transportation or public safety. The first recipient is a 34-year-old woman named Jennifer Washington, no relation, who dreams of becoming a paramedic but can't afford the training program while supporting 2 children on a retail salary. When Jennifer receives the scholarship notification, she calls the number listed and finds herself speaking directly to Dr. Chin. I wanted to thank Ms. Williams personally, Jennifer explains. Her story is part of what inspired me to believe I could do something that matters. Dr. Chin arranges a meeting between Jennifer and Keisha, thinking it will be a brief, pleasant encounter. Instead, the 3 women end up talking for hours about service, sacrifice, and the particular challenges faced by women who choose careers focused on protecting others. People think heroism is dramatic, Keisha tells Jennifer. But most of the time, it's just showing up. Just being there when someone needs help and choosing to help instead of choosing to look away. Jennifer graduates 18 months later at the top of her paramedic class. At the graduation ceremony, she's asked to give a brief speech as the scholarship recipient. She talks about the morning she watched a video of a train operator jumping from a moving vehicle to save a child, and how that moment taught her that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when extraordinary things need doing. Ms. Williams probably thought she was just saving one child, Jennifer tells the audience. But she was doing something bigger than that. She was proving that when we see someone who needs help, we don't have to wait for permission to help them. We don't have to check with supervisors or consult policy manuals or worry about liability. We just have to be brave enough to act. In the audience, Keisha Williams wipes tears from her eyes and realizes that the ripple effects of her 4-second decision will continue long after she's gone. Every person Jennifer saves as a paramedic, every life she touches, every family she helps through crisis, all of it traces back to a moment when a train operator chose courage over procedure. But the story's most profound impact may be in the place where it began, on Tommychan himself. Now 9 years old, he's developing into a thoughtful, empathetic child who seems to understand intuitively that he owes his life to a stranger's courage. His mother has been careful not to burden him with survivor's guilt, but she has taught him about gratitude and service and the obligation we all have to help others when help is needed. Tommy volunteers at a local food bank every Saturday, sorting donations and helping to pack boxes for families in need. He's too young to understand the full implications of what happened to him that morning at Riverside Station, but he's not too young to understand that someone saw him in trouble and chose to help. That lesson has become the foundation of his moral development. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, notices that Tommy is always the first to help classmates who are struggling, whether with schoolwork or social problems or family issues. When she asks him about this during a parent conference, he explains matter-of-factly, "When people need help, you help them. That's what Ms. Keisha taught me." Dr. Chin smiles at this, but she also recognizes the profound truth in her son's simple statement. Keisha Williams did teach him that, not through words or lectures, but through action in a moment when action was desperately needed. The lesson took 4 seconds to deliver, but it will shape Tommy's character for the rest of his life. As Tommy grows older, that lesson expands and deepens. He becomes the kid who stands up to bullies, who includes outcasts in his group of friends, who organizes charity drives for causes his classmates have never heard of. His teachers and coaches consistently describe him as having unusual maturity and empathy for his age. When he's 13, a new student arrives at his school, a refugee from Somalia who speaks little English and knows no one. While other students ignore or avoid the new boy, Tommy immediately befriends him, helps him navigate the school, and organizes tutoring sessions to help him improve his English. The friendship transforms both boys and creates a model that other students begin to follow. The guidance counselor, Mr. Patterson, has worked at the school for 15 years and rarely sees this kind of inclusive leadership from middle school students. When he asks Tommy what motivates him to reach out to students who are struggling, Tommy's answer is immediate. "Someone helped me when I needed it most. Now I help other people when they need it." Mr. Patterson doesn't know the full story behind Tommy's response, but he recognizes the presence of a defining experience, something that shaped the boy's understanding of his place in the world and his responsibility to others. He makes a note in Tommy's file. Exceptional character. Natural leader. Strong service orientation. Recommend for peer mediation program. The peer mediation program trains students to help resolve conflicts between classmates. Tommy excels at it, demonstrating an unusual ability to see multiple perspectives and find common ground. His success leads to an invitation to participate in a district-wide youth leadership conference, where he meets other students who share his commitment to service. At the conference, Tommy gives a presentation about the importance of helping others, even when it's difficult or risky. He doesn't mention the train incident. That story is too personal, too complex for a teenage audience. Instead, he talks about small acts of courage, daily choices to stand up for what's right, the ways that individual actions can create ripple effects that touch many lives. The presentation is recorded and shared on the district's website. It's viewed thousands of times by educators looking for examples of youth leadership. Several teachers use clips from it in their own classrooms to spark discussions about character and service. Tommy's words, shaped by Keisha Williams' actions, continued the chain of influence that began with 4 seconds of moral courage. But even as Tommy grows into the kind of young man his experience has shaped him to become, Keisha Williams continues to grapple with the ongoing implications of her choice. The media attention has long since faded, but the personal impact remains. She's recognized occasionally on the street, thanked by strangers who remember her story. The recognition is always positive, but it's also always uncomfortable for someone who never sought the spotlight. More significantly, she's become a reluctant expert on moral courage, invited regularly to speak at conferences, universities, and training programs. The requests come from diverse sources: medical schools wanting to discuss ethical decision-making, business schools exploring leadership under pressure, military academies examining the balance between orders and conscience. She accepts some of these invitations, declining others. When she does speak, her message is consistent. Heroism isn't complicated, but it's also not easy. It requires the willingness to act when action is needed, regardless of personal cost. But she always emphasizes that her experience was specific to her circumstances, her training, her split-second assessment of the situation. "Don't try to replicate what I did," she tells audiences. "Try to develop the capacity to recognize your own moments of moral choice and the courage to act on them." This message resonates particularly strongly with healthcare workers, who face life and death decisions regularly but within established protocols and hierarchies. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, an emergency room physician in Seattle, attends one of Keisha's presentations and finds herself thinking about it for weeks afterward. "What struck me," she tells her colleagues during a staff meeting, "was her emphasis on recognizing the moment when normal procedures aren't enough. We get so focused on following protocols that we sometimes miss the bigger picture, the human being in front of us who needs something more than what the manual provides." This observation leads to changes in the hospital's approach to patient care. They implement new training focused on ethical decision-making and the appropriate use of professional judgment. Patient satisfaction scores improve measurably, and staff report feeling more empowered to advocate for patients when circumstances require creative solutions. The hospital's changes are documented in a medical journal article that's read by healthcare administrators nationwide. Several other hospitals implement similar programs. The ripple effects of Keisha's 4-second decision continue to spread through systems and institutions she's never heard of, touching lives she'll never know about. Meanwhile, the Transit Authority has quietly revised its emergency protocols to provide more guidance about extraordinary circumstances. The new manual includes a section on critical incident decision-making that acknowledges situations where standard procedures may be insufficient. It's carefully worded to avoid encouraging recklessness while recognizing that emergency responders sometimes face impossible choices. The revision is the result of months of study by a committee that included safety experts, legal advisors, union representatives, and practicing operators. Keisha was invited to participate but declined, saying she preferred to focus on her day-to-day work rather than policy development. However, her case was central to all the committee's discussions. "What the Williams incident taught us," explains Committee Chair Robert Martinez, "is that our people need more than technical training. They need frameworks for thinking through complex situations where multiple values come into conflict. We can't prepare them for every possible scenario, but we can help them develop the judgment to handle unexpected circumstances." The new training program based on these protocols is implemented across the entire transit system. It includes case studies, role-playing exercises, and discussions about the ethical dimensions of public safety work. Feedback from participants is overwhelmingly positive. They report feeling better prepared to handle not just technical emergencies, but moral dilemmas. One participant, Maria Santos, a bus driver with 12 years of experience, finds the training particularly valuable. I've been in situations where I had to choose between following procedure and doing what I thought was right for my passengers," she explains. "This training gave me language for thinking through those choices and confidence that using good judgment isn't necessarily the same as breaking rules." 6 months after completing the training, Maria faces exactly the kind of situation the program was designed to address. During her evening route through a high-crime neighborhood, she notices a teenage girl being followed by 2 older men. The girl appears frightened and is clearly trying to avoid them, but they're gaining ground. Standard procedure would be to radio for police assistance and continue the route. But Maria recognizes that police response time in this area is typically 20 minutes or more, and the girl is in immediate danger. She makes a choice that technically violates protocol but potentially saves a life. She stops the bus, opens the door, and calls to the girl to get on. The girl runs to the bus and climbs aboard, breathing heavily. The men following her stop and walk away when they see witnesses. Maria radios dispatch to report the incident and requests police to meet the bus at the next major stop. The girl is safely reunited with her family, and the incident is resolved without harm to anyone. When Maria's supervisor reviews the incident report, he faces the same kind of decision that the committee spent months analyzing. Maria violated protocol by making an unscheduled stop and involving herself in a potential crime situation. But she also likely prevented a serious assault and demonstrated exactly the kind of moral judgment the new training was designed to develop. The supervisor commends Maria for her actions and uses the incident as a positive example in future training sessions. "This," he tells new drivers, "is what good judgment looks like in practice. Procedures exist to guide us, but they can't cover every situation. Sometimes being a professional means recognizing when the situation requires more than the manual provides." The incident doesn't make the news. It's too routine, too local, too everyday to attract media attention. But it represents something important: the institutionalization of the lesson Keisha Williams taught through her dramatic example. Individual courage can become organizational wisdom when institutions are willing to learn from extraordinary acts. 5 years after jumping from the moving train, Keisha Williams has been promoted again, this time to training supervisor for the entire district. Her job now involves developing curricula, overseeing instruction, and ensuring that new operators receive not just technical training but education in the broader responsibilities of public service. She's created a course called Service and Sacrifice that examines the ethical dimensions of transportation work. The course uses case studies from various emergency situations, including her own, to help students think through complex scenarios where multiple values conflict. It's become one of the most popular electives in the training program. "What we're trying to teach," she explains to a reporter doing a follow-up story on the 5th anniversary of the incident, "is that driving a train or a bus isn't just about moving vehicles from point A to point B. It's about understanding that you're responsible for people's safety, their trust, their lives. That responsibility sometimes requires more than just following procedures." The reporter asks if she still thinks about that morning at Riverside Station, if she dreams about the 4 seconds that changed everything. Keisha smiles and looks out the window of her office, which overlooks the same platform where Tommy Chin fell. "I think about it every day," she says. "Not the jumping part, that was just instinct. I think about the choice. The moment when I had to decide what kind of person I was going to be. That's the moment that really mattered, and it's the moment I try to prepare every new operator for. Because someday, each of them will face their own version of that choice." Tommy Chin is now 14, a freshman in high school who has grown into the kind of young man his rescue shaped him to become. He's president of the school's community service club, captain of the debate team, and a volunteer reading tutor for elementary students. Teachers consistently describe him as mature beyond his years, with an unusual capacity for empathy and leadership. He's also an excellent student, particularly in mathematics and science. His guidance counselor suggests that he consider engineering as a career path, noting his aptitude for both technical subjects and problem solving. Tommy is interested, but he's also drawn to careers in public service, medicine, education, social work, fields where he can directly help people who need assistance. When asked about his future plans during a college preparatory interview, Tommy's answer reflects the values that were crystallized in him by witnessing extraordinary courage. I want to do work that matters. I want to be in a position where I can help people when they need help most. I don't know exactly what form that will take, but I know it needs to be something that makes a difference. The interviewer notes Tommy's maturity and obvious commitment to service, but she doesn't know the story behind his perspective. She doesn't know that his life was saved by a stranger's courage, or that this experience shaped his understanding of moral obligation and human interconnectedness. But Tommy knows. And on days when high school drama seems overwhelming, when teenage problems feel insurmountable, when the future appears uncertain and frightening, he remembers 4 seconds that taught him the most important lesson of his life. There are people in the world who will risk everything to help a stranger in need. Someday, he wants to be one of those people. Dr. Lisa Chin has expanded her scholarship program, now providing funding for 10 students annually to pursue careers in public safety and emergency services. The program has supported aspiring paramedics, firefighters, police officers, nurses, and emergency management professionals. Each recipient is required to complete a community service project and write an essay about the importance of moral courage in their chosen field. The essays are collected annually in a publication that's distributed to training programs across the region. The themes are remarkably consistent: the importance of seeing beyond procedures to human needs, the responsibility that comes with positions of trust, the courage required to act when action is needed most. Reading these essays, Dr. Chin is continually struck by how one woman's 4-second decision has influenced dozens of future public servants. The ripple effects continue to expand, touching communities and situations far removed from that morning at Riverside Station. But perhaps the most significant impact is one that can't be measured or documented: the countless small acts of courage that Keisha's example has inspired. People who speak up when they witness injustice. Employees who report safety violations despite personal risk. Neighbors who intervene when someone needs help. Citizens who choose involvement over indifference. These acts don't make the news, don't become viral videos, don't generate hashtags or headlines. But they represent the real legacy of moral courage, not the dramatic gestures that capture public attention, but the daily choices that shape the character of communities and the quality of human interaction. Sarah Martinez, the transit training instructor who developed the ethics curriculum, has documented hundreds of incidents where operators made choices that technically violated procedure but served the greater good. None as dramatic as Keisha's jump, but all reflecting the same fundamental principle: when human need conflicts with institutional policy, human need should prevail. A bus driver who takes a detour to get a passenger to the hospital during a medical emergency. A train operator who holds a departure for 30 seconds to allow a disabled passenger extra boarding time. A maintenance worker who reports safety hazards that could get him in trouble with supervisors but might prevent accidents. These choices are made daily throughout the transportation system, often by people who have been influenced, directly or indirectly, by Keisha Williams' example. They understand that their job isn't just about moving vehicles, it's about serving people, and sometimes serving people requires bending rules. The cumulative impact of these small acts of courage is a transportation system that functions more humanely, more responsively, more effectively. Customer satisfaction ratings have improved. Safety incidents have decreased. Employee morale has increased. The organization has become more adaptive, more flexible, more focused on its core mission of public service. But the story's influence extends far beyond the transportation industry. Business schools use Keisha's case to discuss ethical leadership. Medical schools examine it as an example of moral courage under pressure. Military academies analyze it in the context of individual initiative versus institutional authority. The case has been written up in academic journals, included in ethics textbooks, and featured in documentary films about heroism and moral choice. Each treatment adds new dimensions to the understanding of what happened that morning and what it means for how we think about courage, responsibility, and human obligation. Yet, for all the analysis and interpretation, the core truth remains simple. A woman saw a child in danger and chose to help him, regardless of personal cost. Everything else, the media attention, the controversy, the policy changes, the cultural impact, flows from that simple choice. As Keisha Williams approaches her 50th birthday, she sometimes reflects on how different her life might have been if she had made a different choice that morning. If she had followed procedure, stayed in the cab, trusted that somehow the situation would resolve itself without her intervention, Tommy Chin would be dead. That stark fact overwhelms all other considerations. Every debate about protocol, every discussion of precedent, every analysis of institutional authority becomes irrelevant in the face of that simple truth. A child is alive who would otherwise be dead, and all because someone chose courage over caution in a moment when courage was desperately needed. The responsibility of that knowledge is sometimes overwhelming. Keisha understands that her story has become larger than her individual experience, that people look to her example when facing their own moral dilemmas. She never asked for that role, never wanted to become a symbol of anything. But she's made peace with it. Because she also understands that symbols are necessary, that people need examples of ordinary individuals doing extraordinary things. If her story helps even one person find the courage to act when action is needed, then the personal cost has been worthwhile. And there's no question that it has helped people find courage. The letters continue to arrive, fewer now than in the immediate aftermath, but still steady. Healthcare workers who stood up to administrators to advocate for patients. Teachers who violated district policies to help students in crisis. Employees who reported dangerous conditions despite threats to their jobs. Each letter tells a similar story. Someone faced a choice between safety and service, between procedure and principle, between looking away and getting involved. And in that moment of choice, they remembered a train operator who jumped from a moving vehicle to save a stranger's child, and they found the strength to do what they knew was right. This is the real legacy of 4 seconds of moral courage, not the headlines or the hashtags, but the quiet multiplication of individual acts of bravery. The understanding that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when extraordinary things need doing. The recognition that heroism isn't complicated, it's just the willingness to help when help is needed most. 10 years later, as Keisha Williams trains the next generation of transit workers, she often tells them about the morning that changed her life. Not to encourage recklessness, but to prepare them for the moment when they might face their own impossible choice. You'll know it when it happens, she tells them. The moment when everything you've been trained to do isn't enough for what needs to be done. When the manual can't help you and procedure can't guide you and you have to decide what kind of person you're going to be. In that moment, remember that your job isn't to follow rules. Your job is to serve people. And sometimes serving people means being brave enough to break the rules that stand in the way of service. It's a lesson that extends far beyond transportation work, far beyond any single profession or situation. It's a lesson about the moral choices that define us, the moments when we discover what we're truly capable of, the courage that exists within ordinary people when extraordinary circumstances demand it. And somewhere in the city, Tommy Chin, now a college sophomore studying emergency medicine, continues to carry that lesson forward. He doesn't remember falling onto the train tracks, but he remembers the woman who saved him. He remembers learning that there are people in the world who will risk everything to help a stranger in need. Someday, he'll be one of those people. The circle of courage, initiated by 4 seconds of moral clarity, will continue to expand through his life and the lives he touches. The ripple effects of a single moment of heroism will continue to spread, touching lives and shaping choices in ways that Keisha Williams will never know about but can trust are happening. Because that's what moral courage does, it multiplies. It inspires. It creates a legacy that extends far beyond the individual act. And in a world that often seems to reward cynicism and self-interest, it reminds us that heroism is possible, that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is the thing you're not supposed to do. The train still runs from Riverside Station every morning at 6:47. Keisha Williams still drives it sometimes, when her administrative duties allow. And every time she passes the spot where Tommy Chin fell 10 years ago, she remembers the moment when she had to choose what kind of person she was going to be. She chose to be someone who jumps. And in making that choice, she taught the world something profound about courage, humanity, and the power of individual action to change everything in the span of 4 seconds. The steel rails sing their eternal song, carrying people safely through their daily journeys. And somewhere in that song is the echo of a choice that proved ordinary people are capable of extraordinary grace when grace is desperately needed. That's the real story of Keisha Williams, not that she was a hero, but that she was human. And in her humanity, she showed the rest of us what we're capable of when courage calls our name.